Okay. Hey, everybody. This is Andrea Merida. I'm one of the people in the Green Party of Denver, Green Party of Colorado as well. We've got a room full of greens here. Everybody say hi. Say hi from Denver.
Hi from Denver.
So we have on the line with us today James Lane. He's a friend of mine, and he is going to talk to us today about a topic that we probably all should get really familiar with, and that is what it means to be Black and green, to be a Black person that is a registered Green Party voter. James Lane is an internet media professional and political activist, a lifelong New Yorker. James lives in Brooklyn and has been a Green Party activist for 16 years. In 2013, he ran for the New York City Public Advocate, and in 2015, he ran for Congress against the Republican candidate Dan Donovan, who was the district attorney who failed to indict anyone in the killing of Eric Garner. He's a member of the Adoptee Rights, Black Lives Matter, and Stop Mass Incarceration movements. His current titles include Director of Analytics and Implementation for GroupM, Editor-in-Chief of Hot Indie News, and he's also a member of the Green Party of the United States Diversity Committee. So everyone say hi to James.
Hi, James. Welcome.
And what I want to do is I want to kick off with you, James, with just telling a little bit more of your story, and because the Green Party is not necessarily a natural place for people of color. And you and I both know, working in the Green Party, that the preponderance of people who are involved tend to be, upper middle class and white and that sort of thing. So, and first I'd like you to tell us, what brought you to this point, and just give us your impressions of as a Black man, what is it like being in the Green Party? Go for it.
Well, great. Well, first I want to apologize for this 15-minute delay. Technical issues, and I always feel that Google doesn't like Green Party members for whatever reason, so they're always trying to sabotage us. But my story is pretty, I think my story resonates with a lot of people that I meet every day. I grew up in Harlem in the 70s during the time when the economy was really rough, where pretty much the president of our country told New York to drop dead. They weren't going to give us any funding. And during the time in the streets, there was a lot of problems, a lot of, people that needed work. Crime in the streets was high, there was a lot of buildings being burnt out, people seeking housing. And it's pretty much like it is now, And so during that time, I remember my mother and her friends going to their local officials and talking about local officials and asking, what can we do about this? What can we do about that? And they were like, well, there's not much we can do. We don't have this. We don't have that. We can't solve these answers. Pretty much useless. But when it came time for election day, they'd come around for your vote again. And I'm like, wait a minute. You didn't do anything during your last term, but yet you want us to vote for you again? That's just ridiculous. So I sort of grew up in this era, from the 70s, the 80s, of all these elected officials, local, state, national level, presidents that didn't really care about what was going on to the people of color in my neighborhood, So, and here I am. I left. I graduated high school. I said, what am I going to do with my life? I joined the Army, and all this kind of stuff. And even in the Army, they kept trying to push voter registration forms on me because they're like, you're in the military, you got to register to vote. And I was like, but why? It's like, I get it. I'm in the Army, and my reasons for being in here isn't so much like I'm for the country or whatever. My reasons for being in the Army is because I'm Black and I really wasn't educated well enough, and I have to admit, on why I should go to college or this or that. I just needed a place to go after high school. So don't try to push this government stuff on me, because everything I've seen growing up proves that it doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. So prove to me why my votes matter. So I went to the Army, came out, started working, and people I worked with in all different areas, healthcare and whatever. A lot of union people always saying, you got to vote, you got to vote. People died for your right to vote. I'm like, I know people died for my right to vote, but give me a candidate to feel strongly about. I mean, every time I hear somebody tell me something, it's a lie. They're campaign promises. And we've seen as soon as these people get into office, they don't do anything that they promised. And instead what they do is they blame the other guy why they can't do anything that they promised you, which is so amazing to me because we've seen this time and time again when we've had Republican presidents that apparently do really horrible things to poor and people of color in this country. And the Democrats said, you see, that's why we need to get Democrats in office. That's why we need Democrats to make everything better. So then you have times when the Democrats are in control. They have a president, Democratic president, and they have majority in the Senate or whatever, and they still don't get anything done. And they still blame it on the Republicans. So at the end of the day, the Democrats are completely useless. So what is the real thing here? Oh, I hear a lot of side thing right now. Is that okay?
Are you getting?
Yes, feedback.
You're
okay,
feeding
sorry. Nice. I'm like Hendrix and feeding back. Okay, so long story short, I just really felt. Should I turn down something on my end, or do you have to turn down something on your end?
Yeah, I'll just keep talking. I'll work on it because we can still hear you.
All right, cool. So long story short, this feeling of people trying to shove their candidates and trying to shove their parties down my throat, it meant nothing to me. I mean, these are just empty words. These are empty promises. These are, what they say at this point, they nader apply in real life. Their actions are just useless. So it wasn't until 2000 that all of a sudden I heard about Ralph Nader and this Green Party campaign. I'm like, wait a minute. He's saying everything that resonates with me. And then I was kind of like awakened to the fact that, wait a minute, you mean there's more than just as Democrats and Republicans? Why is it that my entire life I've been told it's a two-party system and these are the only two parties to vote for? And then now I hear about this Green Party. And with that enlightenment, they've also awakened me to the fact that there's other parties. And, I felt like such a stupid idiot at that point because I'm a grown-ass man. I'm 35 years old. Why is it now I'm learning that there's more than two parties in this country? Then I was like, because I guess the people that have the power and the money don't want you to know about your choices. They don't want you to exercise your ability to vote for somebody that's against this establishment. They don't want you to organize at a local level to actually get what you need done. We've seen time and time again as activists out in the street, in elected officials' offices, signing petitions, getting all the support behind us to make changes happen. But at the end of the day, that politician in office, Democrat or Republican, says, I can't, my hands are tied, I can't really do anything. And so that's why I love the idea and the aspect of the Green Party as political activists running for office, that with the fuel of really making change, because we all know what needs to get done. We work with other activist groups that know what needs to get done. And so with that, we are actually taking power back from these elected officials. And that's why they see us as a threat a lot of the time. They'll do these attack campaigns and whatever. So long story short, because of this, this enlightenment that I felt when I was 35 years old at 2000, I said, oh my God, I can't be the only one that doesn't know about this. So I sort of made a point, talk to people about the Greens, always like having some bit of literature, a button, even at most inappropriate times. We're talking about movies or whatever. We're talking about Deadpool or whatever. And I said, well, if there's a Green Party president at the time, that's what happened. And they're like, what? It's like, what's this Green Party talking about? And then I'll start the conversation because it is just so important. People are so, with all this information and technology and choices that are supposedly being given to them, they don't have real choice. They're constantly just being stuck in this politics of fear. Right now, we have this whole debate on, today is the 13th anniversary of the Iraq War, right? And there's also this big anti-Trump rally going on. So we're trying to figure which one should we go to. And for me personally, the anti-Trump rally, going to that right now at this time is just feeding into that politics of fear. Why are we giving this guy more attention than he needs? Greens, our key value of nonviolence, and the war. We've been protesting the war since before it was a war. We've been protesting back when Clinton and Gore were in office. I remember going to more marches during the Clinton-Gore thing than during the Bush years. So these are all the things that as Greens we're always talking about, and bringing everything back to a local level and how it affects me as a Black man and my brothers and sisters and Latinos and everybody of color, is that the people from the two parties really represent the corporations. Everything that is important to us is not important to these elected officials. At the end of the day, they're just going to go whatever their corporate donors want them to do. They'll put on a great song and dance about, oh yeah, that sounds like a great thing. We should have fresh drinking water, or we should not have mass incarceration, or yeah, police should stop killing Black people. But at the end of the day, what they do in practice doesn't really hold up to what they tell you in their offices. Their promises are just empty. And so that's why I've been encouraging people to, one, register to vote, and to get away from voting for and registering just under the Democratic and Republican parties. Even if they don't want to register in green, I said, look, register as independent. I'll find you as an independent because at least I know you're of the thinking. Whenever I do campaigns, I focus on independents, Greens, and other parties because I know they don't want to be part of this establishment. And the most important thing is when you register green, it's not just for that election. It's not for that election that happens every 4 years, every 1 year, special elections, whatever. You register as a green, and you're actually involved in doing something to build a progressive movement in this country. Right now, a lot of people are following Bernie Sanders around like he's the leader of this progressive movement. But at the end of the day, he's really just representing Democratic light. And if Hillary wins the nomination, all those supporters will just go right over to her. We've seen this time and time again with like working families. The Working Families Party was created in New York as a way to sort of take away possible voters from the Green Party by saying, we're for working families. But at the end of the day, they're not, because they're still nominating and electing the same horrible Democrats that are voting against the needs of the people. So this is why the Green Party means so much to me. Right now, we have a lot of activist groups doing a lot of things against, police brutality, stop mass incarceration. And a lot of the people in those groups have seen, you're right, this corporatocracy we have with the Democrats and Republicans has to end. Because right now, they answer to nobody. And until we put up like a true opposition in this political arena of getting more Greens, especially Greens of color, to register, to show them, you're not just going to get our Black votes. You're not just going to get our Latino votes. Every time I hear like a political expert on CNN or Fox or whatever says, well, Trump could win this because he's got 90%, Latino votes over here, and Hillary could win here because she's going for the Black vote. I am so offended by that. Like, how dare you say that because you're a Democrat, you're entitled to my vote? As I said before, I didn't vote until 2000 because I would never voted for Al Gore, because during his time as vice president, his positions on things against people of color was just so atrocious. Why would I support that man? So this is why it's very important to continue building our party and for more people of color to get involved in registering, signing up, and getting their friends and neighbors to really see what green politics is all about. It's really interesting. Like, people don't want to talk about politics. Like, you go to a bar, you go to a church or whatever. Oh, we don't want to talk about that here. We don't want to talk about that here. But they're quick as anything to shove down their Bernie Sanders or Hillary down your throat. It's like, this is our answer against Trump. And so then I shove back down their throat, my answer against Trump is getting all the people that aren't going to vote during this most important election that we've seen in X number of years to vote green, to vote for whoever our Green Party nominee is. Because pound for pound, our Green Party candidate is way more impressive, way more qualified, and cares more about the people than any of the candidates that these corporate parties put up. So, that's a really long answer to your question about what the Greens mean to me. But, like I said, on a personal note, as you mentioned during reading my bio, like, I'm an adoptee in America, right? I was, born in New York State. My mom was raped at 14, had me, before a month before her 15th birthday, signed papers to say, I won't have any rights to, find out about my son. And I didn't find out about my adoption until after my adoptive parents died when I was 23. So my mother was waiting for 48 years for me to reach out to her because she was told when I'm 18, I'll know that I'm adopted and I could come find her. But when I found out I was adopted, the state said, oh, no, sorry, you don't have any rights here. So I said, well, wait a minute. You know, as I mentioned before, you know, I went to school, I joined the military. I'm trying to be as patriotic as I can, but my rights as a human being are being violated right now. I'm a grown-ass man. I'm 18. I'm 23 at that time. But they're telling me that I can't find out about where my origins are, even after I've just lost my parents. And so in the Greens, you know, this injustice, like, I'm just tired of beating my head against the wall, going and begging assemblymen and Senate and all these legislators to pass bills to open up the original birth certificate so we could find our origins. I'm sick of that. So in New York State, I started a Green Party adoption reform group. And we actually have a platform plank to talk about Green Party adoption reform. My dream is to have a Green Party adoption reform caucus and to have something put on the national level. You know, because this level of activism is kind of like the next level of civil rights. It's way in the back. Like, nobody even cares about it, because in reality, adoptees like me that it affects are going to be dead by the time anybody decides to do any research on it or to do any pass legislation on it. And that's what they're waiting for. They're waiting for us to just die off and stop causing trouble. But while I have this moment in time, I'm trying to do everything I can to have the Green Party be the political party that's leading that ahead. Same thing with the Black Lives Matter movement. Like I said, a lot of groups I work with are seeing Greens as the real force of change for this. And we've seen some Black Lives Matter candidates rise up and run for offices. I think, I forgot, we have like 3 people running for mayor in Baltimore right now, you know, and this is amazing, and we need more of this. So, you know, our key values, you know, our pillars, our 4 pillars, mean so much to having a better existence in this world. And it's just time to shape the conversation, you know, have those uncomfortable conversations of, why is it you're so in love with these Democrats and Republicans that continue to treat you like garbage? They keep coming around asking for your votes, but then when you need something, they give you nothing in return. You're a slave to those systems. And until you register as green and get involved at this level of organizing and making real positive changes political arena, you're going to continue to be slaves to them. You'll be more empowered being a part of this party that has structure in place to actually take your causes up to that next level and make legislation and get people elected and stop this horrors that we're seeing. So, as I said, I can go on forever, but I'm going to stop now, because since I was 15 minutes late, I figure I'll just talk for 15, and then we can go right into Q&A if you want to.
Okay, well, I do have a couple more questions for you. Like, you know, you touched on something that's really timely right now, and this is whole issue of Trump. And Trump, there are a lot of people who support Trump who I think that they've really been sold out by the system. I mean, a lot of his rhetoric is about, you know, the jobs going overseas and, you know, that sort of thing like that. And even we saw in Marco Rubio's speech where he quit his campaign, he even said in his speech, "We hear you, we get you, you have discontent," that sort of thing. In the room with us are a lot of people who are standing tall against foreclosure and against some of the neoliberal anti-homeless policies that have settled in. And I mean, you've talked about Democrats, you know, and I want to underscore that this policy of letting the banks just pillage the hardworking people's property that they work so hard to take, and sometimes even fraudulently, that's absolutely part of the neoliberal agenda. So much as you know, here in Denver, we have what we call criminalization of homelessness ordinance. And basically, it's an anti-camping ban. You can't be asleep, but you can't put a blanket on. The cops will roust you, and supposedly when the cops roust you, they'll tell you, "Oh, you can go to this shelter over there." And you know, and it's this really nasty situation right now where we don't really have enough shelter beds to begin with, and on top of it, some of the shelters are just inappropriate. And we have this idea, and it's a neoliberal idea that comes from conservative think, because Democrats are constantly trying to coddle those so-called conservative voters. But we have these ideas that people who are under-resourced and who have to face systemic violence all the time somehow are not entitled to some basic human creature comforts. Like they ought to be able to stay, you know, in a housing situation with their partner or with their pet or alone, because they, you know, there's a lot of traumas that come to people that have to deal with the system's violence. And so, you know, I don't want to pontificate myself, but for a person who is Black and disenfranchised by the system, for a person who is Latino and disenfranchised by the system, for a person that's facing a real economic hardship, either because the jobs are being shipped overseas or because housing is just such a hassle and foreclosures is just so, all of those things are so violent. For all of those kinds of people, why should you become a Green? Why not just not vote?
Right.
What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of issues because, like I said before, I didn't want to participate in this system because I said, this is so corrupt. I don't want to be a part of it. But it wasn't until, I guess it was 2002 over here in New York, when our state controller was running for governor. He said something that sticks in my head today. And, you know, when we're looking at communities that need funding, we look at the voter turnout in those communities. And that's how we prioritize which communities are going to get funding. And I'm like, wow, did he just say that? And then I look back and I'm like, it makes 100% sense. You know, because communities where you have, you know, like we talk about richer, whiter, more affluent communities do have a higher voter turnout, and thus they have better neighborhoods and they get certain funding and such. And the communities of color, you know, they're sort of looked at like a hassle. Oh, they have all this poor housing there and they want all these programs and whatever. Just give them $10 here, give them $5 there. You know, because at the end of the day, the politicians feel like, well, why should we work harder for them? They have a low voter turnout. And so this is another reason why I said you have to engage in the process. You have to engage in the political process of voting. You know, right now, everybody's so into voting against candidates. They're voting against Trump or they're voting against, you know, whoever the Democrat's going to be. So then why not vote against the corporatocracy? Why not vote against the Democrats and Republicans and say, look, man, you're not the only game in town anymore. We're not going to fall for this. We're tired of being duped by you. You know, we are going to run our own candidates, and these are the issues we're going to run on. I mean, in New York, people always say, well, you know, the Greens don't have a chance to win, and they can't win this election. Or what? I'd vote for them if they could win or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, you realize, and you're seeing this now with the Hillary and the Hillary's Bernie thing right now, where first Hillary's stump speech was this. And then as it goes on during the campaign, she's sounding more and more like Sanders. So she's morphed herself. And that's what we've always said as Greens. It's like, well, we might not win this election, but we're bringing these issues of homelessness and healthcare and then jobs and everything up to the political arena. Because if you just leave it up to these guys, they're just going to bash each other, and people are going to get afraid of one candidate or feel strongly about another and just vote against the candidates and not vote for the issues that they stand for. So this is why, once again, we need to register Greens. We need to run Greens. We need to build a Green community, a strong political Green community. One that says, we're not going to take this stuff anymore from you guys. We're going to stand strong. You know, if you ever want a Green to vote for you, you better be so remarkable as a Democrat that we have to say, you know what? You're so good. Here's a voter registration card. Change your enrollment to Green, and then we'll vote for you. But other than that, you know, there's no reason to continue throwing these people our votes. There is an option. There's a Green option out here. We're voting for real change. We're voting for things like the Green New Deal, you know, for sustainable jobs that actually create more jobs in this country. We're all for a 15 now. We want these changes. But if you leave it in the hands of the Democrats and Republicans, they're going to do the same two games of, we can't get this done because these Republicans won't do it. We can't get this done because these Democrats won't do it. But you know what's funny? The one thing that they'll always do is they'll always vote to give themselves raises. We've seen it. Congress, they couldn't get anything done. Right before like Congress goes out of session, they'll vote to give themselves a raise for doing a job not fully done. And we've seen it here in New York at our city council. We have a lot of programs that are needed in funding, and they all gave themselves 30% raises. That's ridiculous. 40% raise for doing absolutely nothing. So there are people pissed off about it, but not enough people. So that's why everyone is pissed off about it should leave those parties and come to the green and become really active in pushing this movement.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important point that, I always say that the Green Party is the electoral tactic for grassroots movements. And I think it's really important for us to recognize a couple of things. Number one, the overwhelming majority of people in the United States don't vote. It's something like 65 to 70% of all people who are of voting age and they're citizens and they're eligible. They actually don't vote. There's only something like, in the last few elections, there's only been about 30% total voter turnout. So there's a vast number of people there that we haven't even started talking to. And I think one of the mistakes that the Sanders campaign makes, and really just anybody that looks at voting, the mistake that they're making is thinking that the only people who vote are the only pool, right? And that's why I think that there's all these heated discussions, and we're talking about, there's all these dog whistle kinds of things, because, a Democrat will say, yeah, but do you want to have abortion? They don't stop to say, most working class women can't afford the abortion in the first place, right? And people certainly aren't going to be talking about single payer health care. And then you get on the right, all this other stuff about, illegals taking our jobs and this and that and the other. And so there's always all these things that the Democrats or Republicans throw at each other, and because they actually believe that that's the only pool of people they have to pull from. And I've got a room full of people right here who, in Colorado, and I'm not saying anything about these folks, about their records or anything like that, but in Colorado, if you're an ex-felon and if you're off paper, you can vote. So, and so I want to touch on this question of viability, because I think what's important for us to have real change is to have people who are elected into office that have genuine life experience on the issues that matter. So we've got this huge problem with this violence against the people who are unhoused at this moment. And someone who has a house is not going to have the relative experience, right? We have police brutality all over the country. In fact, Baltimore has the #1 rate of police brutality in the country. Guess who's second? Denver, Colorado, right here. And so someone who is Black and working class and who faces police brutality and faces stop and frisk kinds of policies has more relevant experience about dealing with the Denver police than does someone, I don't know, that lives in a gentrified area, right? And so there's this question of what is viability and what our chances actually are and what our challenge actually is. And I would say that we have to get rid of this idea that you have to be as Hollywood and as polished and as corporate looking as possible and a spotless record and this and that and the other. I really want to push back on this idea of who is qualified to run. In Colorado, anybody's qualified to run as long as they're off paper, right? And we as a party, what we offer someone who's interested in making that change, we offer ballot access for one, at least here in Colorado. We offer data, we offer a name, we offer a set of values, and a set of voters that are already here registered as Greens to start to take over an area. So the person who we normally think is viable as a candidate is not the one who can raise all the money. Of course, the Green Party, and I should point out, does not accept corporate funding for any of their candidates or for any of the party. And it is possible to win and be outspent. It's about your message, it's about the relevance that you have to the people in your community. It's actually about thinking strategically, and if someone wants to run in advance and you want to pull votes from an area that's disenfranchised, a group of people that are disenfranchised, you maybe register them to vote the year before or 6 months before you actually declare your candidacy, right? So there's all this strategic things that we can do, and we can build and we can win. So, the topic of this particular talk was black and green. And, you know, we've had a lot of activity over the last year and a half with Black Lives Matter nationally. They have come out recently and said that they weren't going to endorse anybody. You know, we in the National Party, we're trying to make overtures to them very gently. What is your take on the fact that they chose not to endorse? And what do you know about it from your level?
Yeah, well, you know, it's really interesting about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I always have issues with who are the people that are deciding if they're going to endorse or not. I mean, to me, it's a movement, and a few people don't control this movement. So I think, if anything, the actual activists that are on the ground doing whatever, they could sort of form their own decisions on if they want to endorse a candidate or not. I know, like right now, a couple of the candidates are walking around, like Hillary took Sandra Bland's mom, I think, around the campaign trail. And I know Bernie has Eric Garner on the campaign trail with them, sort of trying to use that. And I have to say it is using, because where was Hillary and Bernie when these things happened? Where were any of these elected officials when these things happened?
He was incarcerating them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Hillary set up the whole structure to incarcerate everybody, and Sanders voted for bombing wars and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, at the end of the day, you know, I guess I'm okay with the idea that whoever said that in the Black Lives Matter movement said that they're not going to endorse a candidate. I guess I'm okay with that, just for the fact that I don't really think that anyone really owns that movement, because it's not like the Green Party, where we do have co-chairs and we have clear like leadership on who, you know, who to go to for answers and who's going to write press releases and whatever. You know, it's like the Occupy Wall Street movement saying, okay, we're going to endorse this candidate. You know, it can't be like that, because it was based on general assemblies, you know, the feedback from the people. So I'm fine with that happening. I was worried, though, when I heard leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement meeting with Hillary, or meeting with this candidate, meeting with that candidate. That is kind of tricky. As Greens, as you mentioned before, a lot of what we need to do is focus on communities that make sense for the candidate. You know, that's why when I'm growing up and I see all these people coming up, you know, these sorry if I offend anybody, these white old people or whatever, it's like, how does that resonate with me? You know, I'll say this too, when Barack Obama was running, I'm like saying, please, I'm blacker than Barack Obama. I'm not going to vote for that guy. I mean, he's had like a cherished life. He's gone to Harvard. He lived in Hawaii. He didn't grow up in the hood with me, you know? So that's why I would never support that guy. He doesn't know the plight of this. You know, in fact, when Dr. Henry Louis Gates, you know, got arrested outside of his house, he invites him and the cops to the White House for a beer. You know, that's not how you resolve an issue of race in this country. You know, you actually set up some kind of dialogue. Hell, start up a commission on racism or something, you know? So anyway, but I'm totally off subject. So, you know, the most important thing is, you know, getting, like you say, if there's violence against homelessness or violence against whatever, you know, there's groups already working on these issues. Let's get those groups and encourage them to come out and, you know, support Greens or run as Greens. You know, especially because they know they're butting heads against this power structure. And that's the thing. We need to do something to just shake the heck out of people and say, look, why are you continuing to support these people that are working against you? You know, the only way you can really have power in this thing is to show them that you have power yourselves. You might not have the money to run, you know, $1 million, multi-million-dollar campaign against a particular candidate, but you will have the people power behind you of the organization that you represent. And they say, look, this is my constituent. You know, we've been fighting for this issue. We've been fighting for these changes. These are what we're bringing to the table, and we're not going to just give our votes to you. And in fact, we're not going to give your votes, and we're going to give it to our people that are running the show, our people that have the solutions. Because right now, these politicians aren't giving you solutions. They're just, like I said before, they're just giving you promises. And promises that they'll surely break. And then when their time is up, they say, well, they couldn't get that done. Give them a break. they had a lot against them. So it's just really ridiculous. So I'm sorry, I don't want to give really long answers, but it's really important for us to get into those communities, and do whatever it takes to get into the communities, start the conversation, find out what organizations are in those communities, what they need help with, and talk to them. Like you said, we do have resources. We don't give ourselves enough credit for the resources we have. Ballot lines, data, already constituents that they can reach out to. There's so much more, and campaign schools. If we have somebody that's like, oh, I don't know about running for office, I'm just an activist, let's do this. It's like, look, you're an activist. I've heard you speak on the street corner and get people motivated. You already passed Green Speakers 101. Now we just need to work with you on to how to form your campaign pitches, your 1-minute pitch, your 5-minute pitch, and all this stuff. And you're going to be elected. So that's a long answer to that question. Sorry.
Man, I have to start a campaign school in Colorado. I know. Anyway, so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to ask my friends here if they have any questions for you. And the last question I have for you is, should I be afraid of Trump?
So here's my thing about Trump, right? Like, people are so afraid at the people that are coming out to support these Trump rallies. They act like Trump is the one that created these people. These people have been around for years, especially after the attacks of September 11th. We had really committed, there's a really committed Green family that we loved, that after the attacks of September 11th came around, he said, you know what? I'm making plans to move to Canada, because right now I know that everything that's been accomplished up to this point is done and over with. And sure enough, by the numbers, all these different attacks on our civil liberties have just gone through, and everybody's been okay with it in the guise of, well, it's anti-terrorism. We need to keep our people safe. So you shouldn't be afraid of Trump. In a perfect society, just like during the George Bush years, if Bush says we should go to war with this country, then the senators should have enough brain to say, well, there's not enough evidence, or we shouldn't do this, or Mr. President, we're going to vote against you on that. Why can't they? If they can't do that, then we shouldn't have senators then, and we should just really, that's why I love being a Green, because many times we talk about being elected, and not just being part of the system, but dismantling it and making a better system. Because, people that are voting out of fear of Trump, they're not really even thinking past that. Well, then who are you electing? Because who you're electing is most likely worse. And we've seen the lies that come out now, especially during this election. Hillary is the perfect example of like, oh, she's so great, she's so this. It was like, yeah, well, let's go back to the videotape 5 years ago when she said this. So it's really amazing. So, but what's really interesting, people should be more afraid of the supporters that aren't out at Trump rallies. I mean, those are the people, these are the people with money. These are the ones with power. These are the ones that will be getting their friends to vote for whoever they want to. But at the end of the day, I don't care about the Democrat or Republican that's running for election, because at the end of the day, they're only going to get 30 to 40% of the voting public. I'm looking, and always have been looking, for the 50, 60, 70% of people that aren't going to vote this election. No matter how important it is, those are the people that I want to target. And the only way you can reach a lot of them is actually being out on the street and talking to them and engaging to them. Are you registered to vote? No, why not? Well, you're not registered to vote because of this. Well, did you know you have an alternative? Here's a Green Party, it's a pamphlet. Read about it, register now. Make your voice really truly count by voting against this system and voting for a candidate that actually holds your values in place. In fact, even reach out to that person and say, well, they would have to be registered to vote, but say, hey, would you like to run for office? Because we know people that are registered to vote, but they don't participate. They haven't voted in years because there's no one to vote for. I said, well, then maybe you should vote for yourself. It's like that basic thing in business. When you're tired of working for somebody, maybe it's time for you to start your own business, And it's the same thing with the Greens. If you're tired of seeing politics as usual, and broken promises and atrocities coming down to our people, then it's time for you to get more engaged and register Green, run as Green, and make real change in this country.
Right. All right. Who has a question? Anybody? James, go ahead.
Oh, another James.
Right. Thanks, James. It's nice. Can you see me all right? Cool, cool. A couple things. Let's see. In our paper, I live up in our local paper, and I still hear arguments of Nader being scapegoated, and it just I wonder, the power of the media is just to perpetuate these myths. So I'm wondering, what I like to say is if you're not going to vote for somebody who because you think that they don't have a chance, what does that say about you? That's what I like to tell people, to say like, is that your values? Is that the quality of your vote in that? So do you have anything to say about that?
No, I'm completely in line with you on that. Like we always said, if that's your level of standards, if I'm only going to vote for the person that's winning, that can win. So let me see. In this scenario, if Adolf Hitler was running on the Democratic line, you would vote for Hitler over Trump? Is that what you're telling me as a Democrat? It's like, oh, well, that's just ridiculous. Well, I'm like, well, we're not too far off. I mean, we have two candidates that actually support war and everything, and don't see any problems with that. So, but then they really get pissed off. But it's true. And, that 2000 election was really interesting because there was really a movement, like a real solid thing to bash Nader, bash that campaign, call him out as a spoiler, and when their Democrat lost his own state, they said Nader's the fault for this, Nader's the fault for that. In Florida, there were so many other third-party candidates that got more votes than Nader, but yet Nader was the reason. And the reason why is because we are once again, and you could point this out to people, why Nader was the reason why everyone blames him? Because the power structure saw him as a legitimate threat to their system. And they're going to continue to pound that message that they're spoilers, they don't have a chance to win and whatever, because they don't want you to think outside that box. They want you to continue to be enslaved by this two-party system. And that's what it is.
We have to point out the fact, too, that that all of that is true, what you said about Nader, and it's true that Gore lost Tennessee. But 13% of all Florida Democrats voted for Bush. 13%, and that represents thousands and thousands of people. 200,000. And so that's not a Nader Green Party problem. That's a Democrat Party turnout problem, and they don't believe in the person that you put forth. So don't come blaming us for it. But go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. I'm just going to agree with that. And then the main things is, why was Gore losing so bad? Was it that he agreed with everything Bush was saying, almost lockstep? I mean, even the candidates we have running now, the Democratic candidates, they agree with a lot of principles that we're so against. So, but yeah, I don't want to go on and on. But yeah, so these are the things. We just have to point out people that, one, there's other candidates in that race. Doesn't it seem funny to you that everyone's just bashing Nader? It's like these are the things that once people start thinking, they're like, that does make a little bit of sense. It's like, no, it makes a lot of sense. Just give yourself credit for thinking that, this is wrong. It could cause, an issue. So see, there's another question.
Yeah. How can I put it? I understand that it's, you got to get the idea out that people need to be aware that there's another party. How do we get people past the idea that's sunk into their heads that because of this delegate system, once there's a nomination, your party, your ideal, your platform, whatever, has no chance in the political arena. It's really frustrating to me that, because, say, for instance, Bernie Sanders has only, I don't even know how many delegates, that he possibly can't win. Even if, so, I mean, and I know that's political rhetoric and propagandized movement to sway people from voting for the wrong candidate or the right candidate or whatever. But yeah, I've seen a lot of this. Bernie can't win because he doesn't have the proper delegates. Well, Barack Obama didn't have the proper number of delegates until June, and right now it's only March. But if we can't get people past the idea of delegates and understanding that and believing that that's how presidents or elections are won, how do we get them past, if we can't get them past that idea, how do we get them into the idea that there's another party and that we can wake up, say, 50% of the non-voters that aren't turning out? And I understand it's grassroots. And I suppose I just answered my own question.
Well, and that's the thing. So as a Green, like I always say, I'm not a part of this system. It's kind of like from throw it to the ground. I'm not a part of this system. And we're always, as Greens, talking about electoral reforms. I mean, the whole process of delegates, the whole process of electoral college, this process of voting, like all these things are so archaic and they're so undemocratic, to throw that term around. And like you said, you're seeing it right now. What they're doing right now with that Bernie argument of he doesn't have enough delegates to vote, he's the nadir in their little campaign right now. He's that factor. I saw a thing in the New York Daily News.
He's bigger than that. He actually still has a chance to actually be president. So,
yeah, but I think we have to say too that, I mean, you can say you can have whatever opinion you want about Bernie Sanders, but the fact that he chose to run as a Democrat when he has all of this popular support, when he clearly has a very strong fundraising advantage. I mean, I think he's raising more in individual contributions than anybody else right now. The fact that we exist as Green Party is precisely because of that crap that goes on in the Democratic Party. And there's also some other policy differences that we have. We're not here at the behest of corporations, so we're not going to do wars for oil, for example. But the reason why we exist is because people within the Democratic Party cannot be heard. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, definitely. And it's funny because Bernie himself, like when we saw him at the climate march in New York, he said himself, like, I'm thinking about running, but if I run as an independent, I don't really stand a chance. I'll only run if I can get the Democratic nomination. So as a senator, as a U.S. senator, are you telling me that since the 2000 elections and this whole thing about a third party causing the election, you guys haven't thought of anything to change our current process to make it so that Bernie Sanders 15 years later can run for president and not have that same old argument that we're hearing in the streets? I mean, and Bernie said himself, it's like, if I don't win the Democratic nomination, I'm not going to run as an independent. And so I'm like, well, what are you saying? So all your values go out the window and all your supporters are also go lockstep and support the Hillary Clinton or the Donald Trump that you're saying exists? I would really love it if Bernie did a very noble thing, and if he does lose the nomination, says, a lot of my supporters are for these issues, and I see that the Green Party candidate really goes along with it. Even they might not even have a candidate yet, but their four key pillars, their four pillars represents everything my campaign was built on, and you should all register as Greens and move on and build that movement. I would love that, but that's not going to happen.
He's already said he's not going to.
Right, exactly.
I'd like to address that. That when he came to Denver and then his other rallies, he always says, "It's not me, it's you." Mm-hmm. So all we have to do is hold him to that, to say, like, what do you guys want to do? It's the people's movement. So he's trying to like ride that wave, and so he should support them. Thanks. That's all.
Yeah.
You have a question, Jason?
Yeah, so I noticed this really uncomfortable thing on Facebook with a lot of my friends who are African-American activists or Latino activists in the community, especially around Black Lives Matter here in Denver. Their pictures were popping up at an uncomfortable rate at the Democratic caucuses recently. And so what I worry about is, as an Anglo guy, is, I mean, I'm not even talking to them about that. You know, I'm like, okay, that's for somebody else to deal with, not me. But what I'm a little afraid of is that if it does end up being Trump against Hillary, that a lot of folks, I already know the white Democrats are going to be like this because they're already acting this way. But a lot of folks are going to be like, you're either against Trump with the Democrats, or
you're with the terrorists.
Or you're with the terrorists. You're de facto supporting white supremacy by not going all in against Trump. And I think that that worries me a little bit. But I also know that if it does end up being even a more transparent fascist like Trump as compared to a closet fascist like Hillary, that we're going to be the ones in the street, not the Democrats fighting against these people. So what is my answer to people when they come at me with you're either with us or you're with the terrorist kind of argument about Trump?
I mean, like I always say, it's like I'm not in this two-party game. I'm for building a true progressive movement in this country, a true progressive political party. These Democrats and Republicans, take your values, throw them out the thing, and go for the highest bidder. And if you really want this power, if you really want this change that you're looking for, and these candidates that are putting themselves up as like the real change, you got to stop. You got to say, you know what? We need to build our own party. What's amazing is I've seen so many activists say, you know what? We need to start a new political party. And I'm like, wait a minute. It already exists there for you. And the resources are there. It's like, yeah, but, I don't really know. And so I have to, and once again, we have to educate them on why this makes the most sense for you. Why, if anything, hey, give us a trial period. Join the Greens. Get involved in building the organization. And if it's not what you expect, then you're free to leave and start your own party. But it's time to give the Green Party a try. It's time, like what we said during John Lennon, give East a chance, right? So it's like, give Greens a chance, for goodness sakes. It's time to just break away from this, you're either with us or against this thing. And like we keep saying before, the numbers show. I'm a data guy, and I see the numbers are showing that each year the voter turnout, or like they like to say, the voter apathy, keeps going this way, And when I've seen some polls recently that so many people want a third political party in this country. So the Greens are here. We just need to let people know that this is really the true movement against a Trump. This is really the true movement against endless wars and all these other horrible things that we're experiencing. One thing about Bernie, and why people say, well, why won't you vote for Bernie? Why won't you vote for him? I'm like, he voted for the war. He votes for a lot of other military projects. And all of his speeches about, all these great social projects that we have by taxing the 1% and taking that money and redistributing it, he never talks about decreasing our military budget. Why is that? That's the thing that resonates the loudest with me in his silence, is that he will not come out against the military, because at the end of the day, he's just as much as a hawk as all the other Democrats we've seen in the past. So that's a long answer. Sorry.
All right.
But what else? Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that we probably need to be also very honest about, the challenges of being, working within the Green Party. The truth of the matter is that, we have folks that, one of the things that we have lost by not being Democrats is working with union and learning with unions on how to organize and how to mobilize voters and how to do all those things like that. And so, as a result, in our local parties, we have a certain amount of dysfunction, and we have a certain amount of spinning our wheels. And and as a national party, we've only been around 30, 40 years now, and so we're still going through our growing pains. And I think that we have to disclose to people that in a lot of our locals, there's stuff that's not operating correctly. But first of all, we need to be okay with that. And second of all, we need to be about solutions, and and this all boils down to interpersonal relationships and how do we learn how to collaborate with each other, and because we have to recognize that the nature of the duopoly parties is somewhat authoritarian. It's very top down. Someone up above gives the orders and everybody just execute those orders, and you call in the union to go knock on people's doors and that sort of thing like that. The Green Party is different in that it's bottom up. And so just like we live lives that are, we get angry, we get disorganized, we get all these things, but we're also people of joy. We're also people of commitment to one another. And so all of those bumps and bruises are going to show up in the work that we do. And so when someone comes into the Green Party, if they're expecting a machine, the machine is only going to be as good as you. Right. So, I mean, what would you say about that?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, as we talked about viability and all this stuff, this even comes down to us. Like, we all have to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions and the way that we talk to people. There's a reputation of Greens in New York, for example, as being, oh, that crazy Green over there, or that crazy nut Green over there, because, yeah, I mean, even me, I mean, you see I'm talking right now. Because I'm talking with you, I feel comfortable. And so, like, all of my
That's because I'm Latina. You're not scaring me at all, baby.
Right. But I grew up, like we're talking about being Black in America, right? I've grown up censoring myself so much. I mean, not talking politics. I'm just saying, as an individual growing up in New York and being harassed by police since I was 16 years old for nothing but waiting for a friend at the subway platform, I've conditioned myself to speak slowly, not use my hands so much, because all these things are threatening, and I sort of, when I engage somebody for the first time as a Green, I said, well, here's why you need to learn about Greens and whatever. It's knowing your audience. Certain people that look afraid of this change that you're talking about is so mind-blowing. Like, what are you talking about? You mean there's actually alternatives to these things? There's, this is weird. This is like science fiction. So as we approach like these certain community groups, unions, all this stuff, we also have to remember that it's our first impression as well too. And we do have to sort of monitor ourselves, check ourselves. That's why sometimes it's good to doing this kind of stuff with a buddy. Take a buddy with you and go out in the streets and do these things, so you can sort of have somebody help check you. Because as a growing party, we need to watch our own backs. It's so easy for people to take the good work that we're doing and twist it in such a way that make us look like the enemies. And that shouldn't happen. So I know I really didn't answer that question well at all.
But that's okay. I mean, the point that you made is really important, that we have to take responsibility for what we do and how we say it. And the people that we're trying to recruit into the Green Party are not our enemies, and they have legitimate questions, and they're talking to us simply because they're not being served, and we have to remember that. So
one of the funny things, and one of the arguments we have in our house, and this has been happening since last year, my wife will be on the bus looking at somebody with like a Bernie button, and she'll go up to him and say, so what are you going to do when Bernie loses? I'm like, don't say that. It's like,
I want to know, but
But you know what I mean? Because it's the same thing, because I know how offended I get when someone's, so what are you going to do when Jill Stein loses? It's like, don't talk to me about like when my person loses. Once again, talk to me about what it is that I should learn about your candidate, about your party that's so important. Like, why is it that you're walking around with this button? It's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Well, did you know about, the Green Party? Did you know about their platform? So yeah, so we have this little personal battle at home. So even though we're Greens and we're married and we have a child and everything, we have conflicts at home about how to engage with people on the streets.
I have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
James, thank you again. And I have a couple things that I wanted to address. One is, here in Colorado, we're very fortunate to have a campaign to put a community rights bill into the state constitution. And today was the first day I saw the backlash, how the corporate media, or not necessarily the corporate media, but the right-wing media is going to be just demonizing it. Chris Hedges had an interview with Thomas Lindsay, and this guy was just trying to point out all these very, very powerful statements from Thomas Lindsay, and I'm thinking those statements are beautiful. I love Chris Hedges, and I don't know if you know what this community rights movement is about, but it challenges the corporate state, and it's going to draw out that challenge to go to the courts and draw the challenge. We want to know the decisions, whether we win or lose. If we lose, that's just as good, because then we can have this power to say, look who rules in your community, the corporate state. So we've got that going on here. The other thing I wanted to address is I heard from Black Agenda Report Glenn Ford that there's a conference in Harlem, I think on April 9th. It's called the Black is Back conference, and they're going to talk about self-determination. So I'd like to know what that sort of entails, and how could the community rights movement and aspect help in that self-determination?
If I could, real quick, the Community Rights Amendment. So what people are trying to do here in Colorado is put into our state constitution the right for a municipality to shake off a state exemption over things. And this developed, we had some communities here in Colorado that were facing fracking, and a couple of the city councils said, we're gonna ban fracking in our town. And then the governor came and sued the towns. And so this ballot initiative inserted into our constitution, for lack of a better word, it would allow cities and towns to trump the corporate right? Because the governor came and said, well, these companies have mineral rights as protected by the Constitution and property and blah, 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 blah. And so if we get this passed, and so that's why that feeds into the whole self-determination question that James was talking about. But tell us about that conference if you know about it. Are you aware of it?
No, I don't know about that particular conference, but New York is full of those events that are going on around, and especially like one of the things we have happening is a community control over policing. So it's sort of along that lines of Community Rights Act. If you guys could send me some information about that after this call, I would love it, because this is what we're talking about all the time as Greens, and these are the kinds of things that many of us talk about, how the community does have a right. Like, just because we have an elected official, they're not the ones that make these decisions for us. Like, why should the governor of a state sue these communities because they couldn't get their money land grab in place? It's like, once again, their wishes were to serve their fracking matters or whatever they're trying to appease, and not the people that are going to be poisoned by this. So we need community control. We need the community voices. We need these things passed. And if we see pushback from any elected official, then we know who our next target is when we run our next campaigns, and we bring these things up. They said, yo, you think this guy is for you? Well, he was against this bill and he was against this. And the things he was for were everything corporate that was against you. So these are the things we have to do. And we have to, again, when we talk about data, as far as like voter data and whatever, another part of our aspect is keeping data on these people that are currently in office. And so when supporters go around and try to tell us why we should vote for them, we have to have our information ready to say, well, here's like 10 reasons why you should not vote for them, and actually why you shouldn't be campaigning for them right now. So many people just blindly campaign for people that don't realize they don't represent them.
Right. And we scrutinize hard. I mean, we know who voted for what typically. And the cool thing about being involved in grassroots movements is that in this room, for example, are some policy experts. There are people in this room, maybe people wouldn't realize it, but there are people that know the laws regarding their particular area of expertise probably more than any state legislator does. Michael, right behind my shoulder here, foreclosure law inside and out. Janet over here who's one of the longest Greens that we have in the state of Colorado, knows, you know, the police brutality laws, the police, you know, their protocol about, you know, when to shoot people, and really what resources are available to the houseless, and you know, which city council person voted for what ordinance to punish homeless people. She's a policy expert on that stuff too, and a lot of these folks here in this room are the same way. And so because we are a party of grassroots activists, we have the data, right? We just need to get into a room and talk to each other, and you know, that's why local platforms are really important. These people don't know it, but they're going to help write the platform for the Green Party of Colorado because they're already subject matter experts. I don't need to do all of the research. They have the research. So, you know, that's another really important resource. And so when you have a city council, when Albus Brooks goes up for re-election, guys, you know, right? I mean, I got to, someday I'll tell you the stories about this, guys, but we have the information as to why people should say no. So,
and that's what's most important about that too, is like you said, these are the guys that hold the data right now, and we need to have some place, if it's shareable, published on your website, you know, so that way it's easy to access, you know, because in my job, we've always had this thing for, well, many jobs, always thing where what happens if Jamie gets hit by a bus, you know, and that data is, nobody knows that data anymore. So it's very important, especially now if we have places to store that information, and then we can easily feed it back to the public, you know. And I would love to see like New York State work with you guys on any kind of legislation that you're working on, and work with people over here that are involved in working policies, and sort of do like a think tank and bounce ideas off each other, because that's the only way we're actually going to work together and build a party and make the change that we're all looking for.
Well, the ballot initiative that James was just telling us about, people can go out and look for it at cocrn.org, and it's a community rights amendment that we're trying to get signatures for. And the Green Party of Colorado was the only political party in the state up to a point that endorsed the initiative. And so this is absolutely something that, and I think Thomas Lindsay ran as a Green for Attorney General or something like that in Pennsylvania one year. So this is absolutely the kind of thing that we should all be behind as a national party.
That website, it's Coloradans for Community Rights. That's the better website, coloradans4communityrights.org.
Subject matter experts. Okay, well, if no one else has any other questions,
I'd like to.
Michael, go for it.
Since you've been talking, James, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. It's been very, very educational for me. But throughout your discussion and your history of how you 70s, 80s military got to the Green Party, during that time, what relation did you have with the growth of Green parties in the Eurozone, and how do you see that as a benefit or maybe a liability from them? I was just wondering how they can help grow the party, how that relationship could help grow the party, especially with communities of color.
Yeah, well, it's really fun because, like I said, I didn't really become a Green Party activist until 2000. So, like I said, I was 35 years old during that time. My time from, you know, leaving the military around, not leaving, but, you know, working in the public sector from like the 20s up to 35, I was always more involved with any kind of activist things that are going on. New York City is one of those great places where you see a protest going on and it's like, what's this all about? And you sort of join along and you get more information about it. So as far as, you know, the Greens in the Eurozone, nowadays what I try to do is feed any information back to other people that I know that are interested in Greens and start those discussions. But I really, myself personally, I get more involved in grassroots organizing at our local levels, because New York State has millions of people, and our city council districts, for example, has so many people in it that it would be the same as running like a state election somewhere else. And so I've always been trying to focus more on what the Greens mean in this community, what the Greens mean, you know, in this city. So I really do a lot of work at that level. So I'm sorry I can't fully answer the way that you'd like to. But when I do have questions that people want to know, well, you say that this is a global movement and all this, and I say, well, you know, here's some things. But then I get worried because since I don't know exactly, like, we might have like great Greens doing things in Australia or whatever. There might be some wacky Greens doing some things other else. Like I know in Canada we had a Green that was going to protest the fact that women couldn't wear their ceremonial, you know, oh, it was actually was the full body ceremonial clothing, and I was like, that doesn't sound very green. So I try to shy away and focus more on what Greens mean in your community and what, yeah.
And honey, I got to tell you, you know, being Latina, I ain't telling anybody about the Mexican Green Party. These people, because we're supposed to be anti-privatization, and those fools went ahead and voted to privatize their petroleum company in Mexico, Pemex. So they did that, and they're supporting Peña Nieto, who, you know, we have this atrocity that's been going on most recently in Mexico with the Ayotzinapa 43, the 43 students that were, you know, disappeared basically. And it turns out that the mayor was involved and Peña Nieto is covering them. And the Greens are there, you know, facilitating this in Mexico. You know, I think that we actually have more resonance, and there are Greens in Europe and whatever that are good on environmental stuff. And we in the United States tend to be beyond environmental. We tend to have more of an eco-socialist kind of an attitude, and so I think if we're going to look to anybody in Europe, we probably resonate more with Podemos in Spain. You know, a working class, you know, very eco-socialist and definitely anti-neoliberal kind of an organization. And so it's actually a little dicey because we do have Greens that are in our international committee that will go and hang out with the, you know, many of them were in France just a little while ago with the environmental conference that was there, and we're gonna have to do some conversions there.
Thank you both for your answers, because that really I think brings my focus back to where it should be, especially with foreclosure issues, homeless. It has to be on the street.
Mm-hmm. Bottom up.
That's very good. It's grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
You got to meet the people on the street that are having the issues.
Absolutely, and mobilize it. Anybody else have another comment, question? Okay. Well, James, thank you very much, everybody.
Now I'm going to go off and play a gig in my heavy metal band.
You're the green heavy metal guy out there. All right.
He's right here, actually. So.
Okay. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And sorry again about the technical difficulties in the beginning.
No worries. All righty. Have a good day.
All right. See ya. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.